None of my family came to my wedding. They said it was shameful to get married at such an old age. I am 70, and according to my parents, wearing a white dress at my age is indecent. The word was waiting for me in my mother's voicemail. At our age, you don't pretend to be a bride. It's shameful. She is 73 and still believes that dignity is a closed door. The organist began playing ceremonial music while I stood in the hallway, smoothing out my hand-sewn white dress. My daughter's phone vibrated. My daughter texted me, "Mom, we can't stand this." White is for girls, not grandmas. My son said this in a message. My fiancé, Daniel, poked his head into the room and told me, "We can wait," he whispered. I touched the silver bracelet my granddaughter had woven for me last summer and felt a familiar ache. Love is simple. People make things complicated. "No," I told him. "Let's start on time." He kissed my forehead and left me to the silence of the chapel and the reproach of all those empty seats. Another message came from my father, just 3 words. "Grow old modestly, Marian," as if modesty meant disappearing, as if a woman should wrap herself up like winter underwear and wait out the rest of her life in a drawer. How could my own children repeat the same old commandments and call it caring? I lifted the veil anyway. The mirror gave me back the face I trusted, soft where it deserved to be soft, wrinkled where it deserved to be wrinkled. My hands didn't shake. If they wanted me small and quiet, they had picked the wrong day. The invitations had been sent out weeks ago. So had the other letters, the ones that weren't tied with a ribbon. Little did they know, I had prepared for this day in more than one way. The organ swelled. I gathered my bouquet and walked down the aisle, toward the life I had chosen for myself. If they wanted to be absent, well, absence can leave its mark. But to understand how it all happened, I have to go back to the beginning. I was 19 the first time I wore white. The dress was rented, too tight around the ribs. My mother had pinned a towel to the bodice to keep the seams from coming undone. "No one needs to know," she whispered, her mouth full of pins making the words tremble. "You look just right, and that's all that matters." I didn't know what it felt like to be in that role. I only knew that Leonard smiled like a salesman and smelled like aftershave and new tires. He loved me the way a man loves a device he doesn't fully understand. He uses it anyway, and when it doesn't work, he punished what he didn't understand. We lasted 42 years. We raised 2 children who learned to iron out their feelings before anyone could see the wrinkles. When Leonard died, the casserole parade passed and passed, and the silence that followed wasn't so much grief as empty space on the shelves. I learned that I could wake up at 5 in the morning because I wanted to see the sun rise, not because the man next to me needed coffee. I learned that silence could be a friend. Daniel arrived years later, not with flowers or speeches, but with a flat of tomatoes and a joke about how the soil at the community garden was better company than most people. He was 68, widowed, a retired postal inspector, with careful hands and a habit of reading every sign on every wall. He didn't call me names like Han or Dear. He called me by my name and listened to my answers. The first time he fixed my stubborn screen door, he held the screw like it was a delicate instrument. "Some things don't want to be forced," he said. I kept that sentence. When we told my parents we planned to marry, my mother pressed her lips into a polite line, the same one she used when ladies from church tried to hug her. "At your age?" she asked. "Do you need a ceremony?" My father added, "Companionship is respectable." Spectacle isn't. He said respectable, the way other men say rent is due. My children were more modern about it, which is to say they use soft words that still cut. My daughter Beth suggested a simple registry office, no dress, lunch after. My son Aaron recommended a long engagement to adjust expectations and protect the grandkids from confusion. Confusion? Because they might see me happy and think they could be too? I smiled and told them we'd think about it. Then I went home and hemmed my own dress. You learn around 70 that time is not a staircase but a field. You step where the ground feels true under your feet, and you don't apologize for the prints you leave behind. I wanted white because I wanted new, not because I wanted to pretend I was new. Did they understand the difference? Or did they prefer me in beige, a color that always photographs like surrender? The week before the wedding, the calls intensified. My mother's voice hardened. "Marian, be sensible." My father tried logic. "If you require anything in the future, you'll want your children to be cooperative." The pause after that word did more work than the word itself. Beth sent links to age-appropriate outfits, all pale and practical. Aaron left me a voicemail about financial prudence, reminding me that remarrying could complicate asset distribution later on. He did not say inheritance, but I heard it anyway. I didn't argue. I baked. It keeps the hands busy and the mind precise. Between batches of lemon bars, I wrote the other letters. One to my lawyer, clarifying updates to my will and trust. One to the church board, documenting the harassing messages and asking for a meeting if any official action was being considered. One to the bank, revoking the convenience signature Beth had quietly added when I'd broken my wrist 3 years ago. And one to myself, a list titled "What I Will Not Apologize For." At the top, wearing white. On the morning of the wedding, I brewed coffee at dawn and watched the street wake up. Daniel arrived with the tomatoes he'd promised for the reception and an armful of daffodils. He insisted were "for the lady in the mirror who keeps forgetting she takes my breath away." He said it shy, because that's his way. I tucked one daffodil into my hair for luck, kissed him goodbye, and drove to the chapel alone. The ceremony was beautiful, in the way honest things are beautiful. Plain, bright, slightly terrifying. Our friend Corinne sang. The pastor, a young woman with a voice that could cut an apple cleanly in midair, asked the questions. Daniel and I answered with the courage you find after a long life of answering everyone else's. We slipped rings onto fingers that had washed 1,000 dishes, held 1,000 sorrows, and still reached out toward each other like loons calling across a lake. Our friends clapped, their joy uncomplicated. Afterward, we ate lemon cake and tomatoes that tasted like sun. People danced badly in the church hall. Someone's toddler fell asleep under the gift table. It would have been perfect, if not for the empty chairs and the messages waiting in my pocket, little stones I could not yet stop touching. I let the music carry me to the end of the afternoon. Then I excused myself and stepped outside to call my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Have you come to your senses?" she asked. No greeting. No question about whether I'd said I do. "I married the man I love," I said. "It was lovely." "Lovely," she repeated, as if testing whether the word could pass customs. "And the dress?" "White," I said, "honest as daylight." She exhaled through her teeth. "At our age, we do not play at being virgins." "I'm not playing at anything," I said. "I'm losing my patience for other people's uniforms." "Grow old with modesty," my father's voice called from somewhere near her phone, as if he were the chorus and she the lead. "Is disappearing the same as modesty?" I asked. "Is quiet the same as consent?" "Don't be difficult," my mother said, and hung up. The next morning, the church office called. The secretary's voice quivered with the kindness of someone caught in the middle. "Marian, I wanted you to hear it from me. There's been a complaint about my dress? About impropriety," she said carefully. "An accusation that the sanctuary was used for a performance. We need to meet, if you're willing." I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and looked at Daniel, who had his glasses perched on the end of his nose, reading the local paper as if it were a case file. "Let's be willing," I said. At the meeting, my mother did not come, but her absence had a shadow. The complaint quoted phrases that were hers: age-appropriate, dignity, confusion for children. The board looked tired and apologetic. I laid out the messages, printed and stapled, dates and times, neat in the margins. I was careful to leave the edges smooth. "No one thinks you're reasonable if your papers are dog-eared." "I know what this is," I said, "and it isn't about God. It's about control. My family believes that a woman's value decreases by the candle on her birthday cake. I disagree. I believe a woman grows larger, not smaller." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room knew. Daniel sat beside me, a quiet anchor. The board chair cleared his throat and offered soft words, the ecclesiastical equivalent of tissues. Policies, community standards, sensitivity. I nodded. "Thank you," I said, and handed him my letter requesting a hearing if any discipline was to be considered. I wasn't new to committees. I'd managed bake sales that required more negotiation. On the way out, a woman from the choir squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, your dress was beautiful." "It wasn't the dress," I said. "It was the nerve." We both laughed, but there was iron under it. 2 days later, a white envelope arrived by certified mail. I signed for it in my robe, hair still wet from the shower. The return address was the county courthouse. Inside, on cardstock that smelled like offices, was a notice of a guardianship petition in the matter of Marion Elaine Porter alleging cognitive decline, inability to manage finances, and vulnerability to undue influence. Petitioner, Bethany Porter, adult daughter. Hearing date, 3 weeks from Friday. I sat down at the kitchen table again. The house hummed with the small sounds of a morning: refrigerator, street, the neighbor's dog complaining at a squirrel. Daniel poured more coffee without asking. He has a way of making the air beside me feel like a hand on my back. "You knew something was coming," he said gently. "I did," I said. "I didn't know it would be that." He slid his glasses up his nose with one finger. "We'll answer." "We already did." I opened the red binder I'd started months earlier, the one with the tab that read contingencies, because I am the kind of woman who leaves an umbrella by the door even on sunny days. Inside were copies of my neuropsych evaluation from the university clinic. Normal aging, no impairment, my updated will, my revocation of Beth's convenient signature at the bank, my medical power of attorney naming Daniel and Corinne as co-agents, and a summary of the messages I'd received about propriety and optics. On the last page, a letter from my attorney addressed to me. "If a petition is filed, call me. I will handle it." Daniel kissed the top of my head and reached for his phone. "I've got her number," he said. At the first consultation, my attorney, Miss Vega, made a neat stack of everything, tapped it into alignment, and looked at me over the top of her glasses. "They'll argue you're impulsive and easily swayed because of the wedding," she said. "They'll frame your choice of dress as evidence of denial, not joy. They'll say you're vulnerable. I'm 70 and newly married," I said. "I am vulnerable. To the flu, to a good love song, not to theft." Miss Vega smiled. "Good. We'll need your patience and your paperwork. Bring me anything you think is small. The small things are what stories are made of." I brought everything. I printed emails and hymns and receipts for flowers and the screenshot of a text Beth had sent to my son, accidentally including me, complaining that I was performing adolescence. I made a timeline: my engagement, the first complaints, the escalation, the complaint to the church, the white envelope. I included a copy of a notarized statement from my neighbor, who had overheard Beth on the porch telling Aaron on speakerphone that if Mom insists on playing bride, a judge can stop her from playing bank. I included the daffodil from my hair pressed between 2 pages and labeled it Evidence of Joy, just to remind myself what all of this was really about. Beth called that night. "I got certified mail today," she said, voice high with fury. "You revoked my bank authorization." "Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" They asked questions. "Good," I said. "Questions are healthy." She exhaled hard. "You're making a spectacle. You wore white like some girl. You're going to embarrass us in court. Just sign over the durable power of attorney and be done with it. It's not about money." "Whose peace of mind is this for?" I asked. The question had become a lever. I could feel it lifting things I used to carry. "You're not thinking straight," she said. "Everyone says so." "Everyone who?" "The family." "My family didn't come to my wedding," I said. "So perhaps define your terms." She hung up. When someone tells you to disappear, you must decide whether to obey or whether to grow. I grew. I went back to the community garden with Daniel and pulled weeds with my hands, dirt under my clean wedding nails. Corinne came over and helped me turn the living room into a filing room. I taught myself how to breathe when the night rose up and whispered, "What if you're wrong?" into my ear. I wrote another list. What actually matters. On it, I put Daniel's hand on mine, sunlight on the tomato skins, the way my granddaughter's braid felt against my wrist when she tied that bracelet last summer, lemon cake crumbs, the word wife. The church board scheduled the hearing for the week before the courtroom hearing, as if to keep the calendar interesting. I wore a navy dress to that one, because I am not stubborn where it might confuse the point. I read a statement. The board accepted it, ashamed of their part, withdrew the complaint with an apology, and asked if I would be willing to speak at the women's luncheon about aging and agency. I agreed on the condition that the luncheon's theme would be bright colors. They laughed, and then they understood I wasn't joking. Meanwhile, Miss Vega filed our response to the guardianship petition, asked the court for an expedited neuropsych assessment to reaffirm the earlier one, and requested sanctions for a frivolous filing if the judge found no basis. Beth's attorney, hired with money I later learned she'd taken from a joint trip fund without telling her husband, filed an addendum full of adjectives and a stack of affidavits from distant cousins who had not seen me since 1998. One of them claimed I had once cried in a grocery store. I had. The pears were beautiful that day. Grief makes strange mathematics of beauty. Aaron stayed quieter, which had always been his way. He sent me a single text. "We can still fix this privately. Sell the house, move into an apartment near me, let me handle your accounts, no court. It's for the best." "For whom?" I typed, then backspaced and wrote, "No." I put my phone face down and waited for the trembling in my hands to pass. Daniel and I made a rehearsal of the hearing. He played the judge. Corinne asked me questions as if she were cross-examining. We practiced, and we cooked. On the morning of the hearing, I put on a gray suit I'd kept since my days managing the dental office, the one with pockets deep enough for note cards and courage. Daniel wore his only tie. Corinne hugged me in the hallway and whispered, "You look like a verdict." The courtroom felt like a schoolroom appointed by a stern aunt. Wood, flags, a clock that ticked too loudly. Beth sat at the petitioner's table with her lawyer, stiff with righteousness. Aaron sat behind her, mouth a thin line. My parents did not come, which was both a relief and a kind of aching proof. Beth's attorney went first, singing the now familiar song of dignity and decline. He gestured at my white dress in a photograph submitted as Exhibit A, as if fabric could be evidence. He described my marriage as sudden and Daniel as a new influence. He called my children long-standing supports. When he finished, the judge, a woman with eyes that looked like she had seen everything and chosen what mattered, asked him 2 questions. "Do you have medical evidence?" she said. "Do you have financial irregularities that are not explained by the revocations Ms. Porter filed before your petition?" He shuffled papers. He had phrasing. He did not have proof. Miss Vega called me to the stand. I raised my right hand and promised to tell the truth. An easy promise at my age. She asked me to describe my life. I kept it simple. I grocery shop. I pay bills. I volunteer at the library on Tuesdays, and I can still carry a full tray of books without reshelving my spine. I married a man who brings tomatoes instead of drama. I wore white because I wanted to. She asked if I managed my medications. I produced a chart. She asked if I understood the implications of marriage on estate planning. I produced the prenup Daniel and I had signed, protecting my assets for me and his for him, with a simple clause about the house. Life estate to me, optional life estate to him if he outlives me. Remainder to the charitable trust I had established in memory of my sister, who died 20 years earlier in a beige room she hated. The trust's purpose: grants for women over 60 starting something new. In cross-examination, Beth's attorney asked if I cried when my mother told me white was shameful. Yes, I said, and then I stopped. He asked if my husband died, and I sought companionship to fill a void. I sought love because I had a heart, I said. He asked if I remembered crying in a grocery store. I smiled. The pears were beautiful, I said. The judge's mouth twitched. Miss Vega called one more witness, my doctor from the university clinic, who confirmed my assessment: normal aging, no impairment, no need for guardianship. She used short sentences. Beth's attorney used too many. The judge thanked everyone and said she'd issue a ruling by the end of the day. We waited in the hallway where the light was the color of paper. Beth approached, her heels sharp on the tile. "You could have ended this quietly," she said. "You chose a spectacle." "I chose a marriage," I said. "You chose a petition." "You humiliated me," she said. "At the bank, at church, everywhere." "How did I humiliate you at places I wasn't present?" I asked. "Was it my absence that did it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "This is about safety," she said finally. "You're impulsive." "Impulsive," I said, tasting the word. "Or alive." The judge called us back at 3:30. She read her ruling calmly, as if she were ordering lunch. Petition denied. Costs to petitioner. Sanctions declined, but warning issued against future frivolous filings. She looked at Beth. "Disagreements about lifestyle are not grounds for stripping someone of their rights," she said. "Miss, Porter is entitled to make choices her family dislikes." She turned to me. "Congratulations on your marriage," she added, and somehow made it not personal, just precise. Outside the courthouse, the sky had the clean blue of a new sheet. Daniel and I stood on the steps and let the sunlight write itself on our faces. I wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly I felt tired. Tired and grateful and old in the good way, the way that means you have seen enough to know what to keep. Beth did not speak to me for a week. Aaron sent a text that said, "You could have handled that differently." I didn't respond. My mother left a voicemail. "You've shamed us." I deleted it. Then in the middle of the second week, a letter arrived from my granddaughter Sophie, 13, who had stayed quiet through all of this, as children do when their parents are loud. It was written in careful pen on notebook paper, dotted I's that looked like stars. "Dear Nana, I liked your dress. It looked like clouds. I'm sorry Dad said not to come. I wanted to. Please don't be mad at me. Love, Sophie. I cried then, not because it hurt, because it mattered. Because somewhere between the empty pews in the courtroom, there was a girl with a pen deciding whom she wanted to be. I wrote back, Dear Sophie, I'm never mad at you for being a kid in a storm the adults should be shielding you from. Clouds are where rain begins, and rain is where gardens grow. Come for lemon bars anytime. Love, Nana. I tucked a Polaroid from the wedding into the envelope. Just Daniel and me under the arch, his tie a little crooked, my daffodil bright, and mailed it the slow way to make it a ritual. When the church women's luncheon arrived, I wore a red jacket. The theme was bright colors as promised. I told my story without naming names, and halfway through, I realized the room was holding its breath. Afterward, a woman with white hair cut like a question mark took my hand and said, My daughter took my checkbook when I started dating. She said it was for the best. I let her. I wish I had done what you did. It's not too late, I said. Start with a list. What you will not apologize for. We started something then, not official at first. A circle of women who met on Tuesdays after library hours with cookies and determined faces. We called it the Daffodil Circle because we liked how it sounded and because the flower lifts its face to the sky even when it's cold. We shared scripts for difficult conversations. We exchanged names of attorneys and therapists. We coached each other on how to answer when someone says, at your age. We made a small grant from my sister's trust to a 71-year-old who wanted to open a knitting shop and needed permits she didn't understand. We went to her opening wearing all the colors and bought more yarn than we could knit in 5 years. Beth heard about the circle and called me. Are you recruiting? She asked, voice wet with disdain. Little old ladies in white capes? We're recruiting spines, I said. They don't come in sizes. You're mocking me, she said. I'm telling you what I'm doing so you don't have to hear it from someone else and feel humiliated, I said. I don't want that for you. I want you to stop wanting smallness for me. She was quiet so long I thought the line had dropped. Then she said, almost childlike, What if I don't know how? Start by not calling joy a spectacle, I said. Start by not confusing management with care. It's not that simple, she said. I know, I said. That's why we're still talking. We were still talking when the next twist arrived. One afternoon, a man in a suit knocked on my door and handed me another envelope. Not from a court this time, from a realtor. It seems Aaron had listed my house for valuation with a local agency, pretending he had the authority to explore options on my behalf. The agent, a friend of a friend, had done his due diligence and called Daniel, who called me into the room with a face that looked like thunder remembered its manners. I called Aaron. Why are there photos of my living room on the internet? I asked. It's just a market look, he said. No commitment. Everyone's doing it, everyone, again. The word tired me. Remove them, I said. Today. Silence. Then the sigh of a man who thinks he is reasonable. This is short-sighted, Mom. The proceeds could be divided in a trust. You could have an allowance, I repeated, as if tasting a dish I could not name. I will not be given pennies from $1 I earned. He tried another tactic. Daniel could be using you. You know how much money Daniel has, I said. He shows you his tomatoes. It's not about money, he said. For whom? I asked. I wondered if he could hear his own echo. I called Miss Vega. She sent a letter that was polite, like a locked door. The photos came down. The agent apologized and sent a fruit basket I re-gifted to the choir. Aaron sent a final message. If you keep cutting us out, don't expect us to be there when you need us. When, not if. It was always a forecast, never a question. I typed back, when I need you, I will ask. If you cannot come, I will call someone who can. That is not a punishment. That is adulthood. I didn't send it. I imagined him reading it and twisting it into something else. Instead, I put down my phone and went outside to the garden, where the work is honest. By summer, the daffodil circle had grown. We met once in the church hall for a white dress day at the insistence of Corinne, who claimed we deserve pageantry in the most sincere sense. We invited women to wear white if they wanted, not because of purity, a dog we no longer fed, but because the color collected the light. My mother, hearing of it through one of her informants, called me at dawn. "So now you're founding a cult," she said. "A cult of women with their names on their own checking accounts," I said. "Membership dues are paid in boundary sentences." "Your sister never gave us this trouble," she said. "My sister died at 50, I said quietly. "I intend to live past that, Mother." She sputtered, then shifted to safer ground. "Your father fell last week. The doctor says he should use a cane. He refuses. I'll bring Daniel," I said. "He's good at making men think things are their idea." We drove over. My father tried to stand without wincing and failed. Daniel showed him a cane he had in the trunk from a friend who didn't need it anymore, which was both a lie and a kindness. My father accepted it with a grudging nod and the tiniest gratitude in his eyes. My mother watched me watch him, and something softened, the way flower clumps go smooth under steady water. "Stay for tea," she said after, which was her version of an apology. We sat with cups we only used for guests and spoke about the weather like it was an old friend who had lost weight. When we left, my mother touched my sleeve. "White is difficult to keep clean," she said, not unkindly. "I'm not afraid of stains," I said. "I own soap." She snorted, and for a second we were two women with an inside joke instead of a war between us. The truce held just long enough for fall. Then Sophie called in tears. "Dad says I can't come over anymore," she said. "He says you're a bad influence." I closed my eyes, pressed the phone to my ear, as if I could hold her through it. "Why?" "Because I asked if Nana could take me dress shopping," she said, voice wobbling, "for homecoming." "Ah," I said. I did not say the thing my heart yelled. That my son would use a dress to punish me felt like a piece of inherited furniture I had failed to give away. Could you talk to him?" she asked. "I will," I said, "and if he says no, I will write you a note you can keep folded in your pocket that says, 'I am allowed to want things.'" Aaron answered on the second ring. "She's 13, he said before I could speak. "She doesn't need your opinions." "She asked me to take her shopping for a dress that will hold a memory," I said. "That's not a political act." "It is in this family," he said. "You turned everything into a performance." "What if it's a lesson?" I asked. "What if the lesson is that bodies don't expire like coupons and joy isn't reserved for the unwrinkled?" "Don't be crude," he said. "Crude is calling joy a spectacle," I said. "Crude is offering your mother an allowance." We did not resolve it on the phone. We met at a coffee shop where the chairs were too low, the way modern places like to make older people feel like children. I sat up straight anyway. Aaron stared into his cup as if the foam held answers. "You changed," he said finally, "after Dad died." "After you met Daniel? It's like you started showing," I said, "like a woman who is finally allowed to arrive at her own life." He rubbed his forehead. "I miss the version of you who didn't consume so much space." I breathed out. "I was never small," I said. "I just folded myself." "Did you think that was comfortable?" He didn't answer. We compromised. I would take Sophie shopping, but he would approve the dress. The leash depressed me and also let us move forward. We went. Sophie chose a blue dress that made her eyes look like lake water at dusk. She spun in the mirror and said, "Nana, I think I understand the white thing now." "What do you understand?" "That it's not about the color," she said. "It's about getting to be a person you like in a room where other people might not." I wiped my eyes in the dressing room and said, "Yes." After homecoming, Erin sent me a photo of Sophie and her friends, 3 girls lined up against a gymnasium wall as if the world were a stage they hadn't yet been told they could own. Under it, he wrote, "She looked nice." "Thank you." It wasn't a surrender. It was a small, precise nod. I took it and placed it carefully on the shelf. Winter came back like it always does, indifferent to human schedules. The Daffodil Circle met at my house, and we wrote letters to ourselves about the kind of old women we wanted to be. I wrote, "I want to be the woman who keeps a white dress in the closet, not as a relic, but as a reminder. I want to be the woman who knows when to be gentle and when to be granite. I want to be the woman my granddaughter thinks I am." And then, because stories need a final knot, the phone rang with news I did not expect. My mother was in the hospital, a fall in the kitchen, a fainting spell, a hip that decided it was done playing along. I went. Of course I went. Daniel drove. The hospital smelled like lemon and something a little like fear. My father sat at her bedside, eyes glassy, fingers clenched around the cane he now pretended he had always used. My mother looked small in the bed, the way strong people do when they are caught horizontal. She saw me, and her mouth trembled. "Marion," she said. It was the first time in months she had said my name like a gift, not a warning. "I'm here," I said. "How could I not be?" she cried. Not the tidy tears she preferred, but the messy ones that make your face into a confession. "I was wrong," she said. "You looked happy." She gulped the word like a fish. "I wanted you to be respectable." I forgot that being alive is respectable. I held her hand. It felt like tissue paper wrapped around wire. "You taught me to iron napkins," I said. "You could have taught me this too." "I wasn't taught," she whispered. "I married at 16 in a church basement with 3 carnations and a dress the color of dishwater. My mother told me white was for women who could afford it." She laughed a little. It sounded like something breaking in a good way. "Maybe I despised what I couldn't have." "Maybe," I said. The edges of my anger softened, not because she had earned it, but because I was tired of the wait. "We can start again." She nodded, regal even then. "I would like that." She recovered slowly. I visited and learned the choreography of hospital corridors. My father let me make decisions while pretending the nurse had suggested them. Beth came, and in the fluorescent light, her certainty frayed. She watched me adjust the pillows and asked quietly, "How do you always know what to do?" "I don't," I said. "I just do the next gentle thing and hope I'm roughly right." She nodded and looked at our mother with eyes that had the watery shine of a girl who wanted permission. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not to me, not to anyone in particular. I keep thinking I'm protecting you, and instead I'm just carving you into pieces that fit me." "We can start again," I said, because it was the only sentence that seemed to hold. In the spring, after rehabilitation and a cane of her own, my mother came to the church hall to watch me speak at the Daffodil Circle's first public forum. She wore a coat the color of robin's eggs and a hat that had not been out of its box since 1972. She sat in the front row with her hands folded and did not flinch when I told the story of a woman who wore white at 70 and survived the phone calls. When I finished, the room stood. My mother stayed seated and clapped deliberately as if counting each beat. After She embraced me. It felt like someone had opened a door that had been painted shut for years. Aaron came too, lingering near the back, pretending to study the pamphlets. He asked Daniel about tomatoes and asked me nothing, which I had learned was his version of yielding. Beth joined the circle, not at first as a participant, but as a listener, then as a helper, then as a woman who learned how to say, "I was wrong," without swallowing glass. She took Sophie to buy a white blouse for a school orchestra concert and did not make a speech about it. Small things. Stories are made of them. People expect revenge to look like a courtroom explosion or a ruined bank account. Sometimes it is quieter. Sometimes revenge is a long table crowded with women who used to apologize at the beginning of every sentence and now only apologize when they accidentally step on someone's foot. Sometimes revenge is a granddaughter who writes an essay titled "The Day My Nana Looked Like a Cloud" and wins a citywide contest for it. Sometimes revenge is the neat click of a pen as you sign your name to paperwork no one else will ever hold for you again. On our first anniversary, Daniel and I had a small party in the garden. The tomatoes came late that year, but tasted like they had kept a secret for us. Corinne sang again. My mother brought a lemon cake she'd bought at the fancy bakery and insisted she had baked herself, which I allowed because that was our new language for love. My father arrived with his cane and a bow tie and shook Daniel's hand and told him gruffly, "You're good for her." Daniel said, "She's good for me." It was an even ledger. At sunset, Sophie took my hand. "Nana," she said, "do you still have your dress?" "In the closet," I said. "Why?" "Because I want to borrow it someday," she said, cheeks pink with the audacity of wanting. "Not for a wedding. For a day when I need to remember I can be all the things and no one gets to tell me otherwise." I laughed then, the kind that starts in your rib cage and shakes you warm. "It's yours," I said, "on one condition." "What?" "You spill on it," I said. "You stain it with something delicious. You live in it for a day." She nodded solemnly, which made Daniel wipe his eyes. That night, after everyone left and the garden went dark in that soft way old gardens do, I hung up the white dress and touched the fabric like a prayer. I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding and the full room at the forum. I thought about the envelope from the court and the envelope from Sophie. I thought about my mother's hat and my father's cane and the word wife that still fit in my mouth like a pear that had just reached perfect. I thought about all the words I had been told: be modest, be small, be sensible, and the ones I chose instead: be honest, be brave, be alive. People will tell you that at 70, you should know better than to wear white. I know better than that. I know that a dress is a decision, and a decision is a life, and a life is a field where you choose where to step. How else could my own son learn to stop confusing caution with love? How else could my daughter unlearn the habit of management dressed as care? How else could my mother find a way to clap for a daughter she once wanted to fold away? There is a photo from our anniversary that I keep on the fridge. In it, Daniel is laughing with his head thrown back. Corinne's mouth is open in the middle of a note. My mother is pretending she baked the cake. My father's cane leans against the table like it's finally at ease. Aaron is watching Sophie and not worrying about optics because there is nothing to manage when joy is the only policy. And I am there in the middle of it, not in white that day, but in red again, the color of a heart that will not sit down, the color of a stop sign for anyone who thinks they get to decide the size of me. If you are waiting for the door to open, I will tell you a secret. Sometimes you are the door. Sometimes the door is a dress. Sometimes the door is a word you finally say out loud in a room that once told you to whisper. Step through. Track light on the floor behind you so others can follow. And if anyone talks about modesty as if it were a synonym for erasure, smile and let them hear the rustle of your life when you move. It sounds like silk. It sounds like applause.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.